Official visits have been set. I guess now it's time to land the plane, I guess you could say. But we're going to talk about it on 94 feet of UNC.
Gordy to Black. The time, 18. Shot, Jordan! Michael Jordan!
Swicker with the defense and the rebound. That's a good effort by Swicker.
Stackhouse streaking in on Park. Rebound stuck is good, and he gets fouled by Park. Oh my goodness, what a dunk by Stackhouse.
Interesting that he brought him back so quickly, but you know what? They're down 8. It's very...
The glass no good. Rebound followed by Hansgrove. Good! Carolina.
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key.
Alice about this over. Carolina. The Tar Heels have won the national championship.
And that is it. There is a new team in college basketball. North Carolina takes the title. Any final. North Carolina is the 2009 national champion. And this year, the confetti is going to fall to North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time.
What's up, everybody? It is Friday, September 20th. You are tuned in to the 94 feet of UNC podcast. I am your host, Linzel Graham. I got a special guest in the building with me today. But before we get into introducing him and everything, make sure that you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell on my YouTube channel at 94 feet of UNC so that you don't miss out on any content that I provide for you guys. Because once again, as I always tell you all, you never know who's going to stop through the Zell Dome, right? Like, special guests just keep popping up. They keep ringing the doorbells. So make sure you hit the notification bell, subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on anything. Also, follow me on my social medias at 94 feet of UNC on Instagram and on Twitter. I respond back, I follow back, things like that. So, and 94 feet of UNC podcast merchandise coming soon. So once again, make sure that you like, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on socials so that you don't miss out on any giveaways and merchandise and contests and things like that I'm going to provide for you guys coming here soon. As I said before, my special guest in the building today is my man, Jonathan Adams from the Point to the Passer podcast. Jonathan, how are you, my guy?
I'm good, Linzel. Great to see you. Excited to be here. Excited to be in the Zell Dome. Impressed that in a few months you've already got a dome named after you, and we've been going for about a year. We're just trying to get a court named after us. So that's kind of the next goal.
Hey, I'm with that. I'm with that. So, I mean, just call it the JC court.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that was just off the top of the dome. I mean, y'all ain't got to stick with that. But, it's something. You can rock with it for right now. Temporary purposes, right? Like, so.
For sure.
Listen,
for sure.
Man, I appreciate you stopping by today, man, just to chop it up with me. For those listening, this is kind of like a little different show that we're gonna do today. We just gonna do things just off the dome. Like, there's no specific topics that we're gonna talk about. Me and Jonathan just gonna kind of ping pong ideas and topics and things like that off of each other. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure he's looking forward to it. So, Jonathan, let's just get right into it, though. I am going to ask a basic question that I normally ask all my other guests. Number one, how did you become a podcaster? And then number two, well, I tell you what, let's back it up. That's the second question. For the first question I'm going to ask you is, how did you become a Tar Heel fan? And number two, how did you become a podcaster?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in Chapel Hill. My parents moved to the area when I was really young from Texas. They went to the University of Nebraska, so they were big Nebraska Cornhuskers fans. But as soon as they moved to Chapel Hill, they became UNC diehards right away. And
yeah,
I grew up with that. The sign, the old slogan for Orange County that you'll be a fan for life. That's really true for me. I think it's true for a lot of folks from the area. It's true for my brother as well, who ended up going to UNC. He's an alum. And so we podcast together, which is fun. But really early on, so my earliest memories, I always had just been the kid who would commentate his own games in the backyard. And even before that, would super nerdy, but I would actually have my parents, when I was maybe like 3 or 4, leave the room before a game, before Carolina was playing, and then introduce them like I was doing the starting lineups and have everybody come in. So it's always been kind of a fabric, both in terms of gravitating towards a microphone, but also Carolina basketball. And then, as you know, Carolina basketball and really college basketball is such a part of the fabric of the community in Chapel Hill and in the Triangle. And I think about the fact that it's not that big a place either, Chapel Hill. So would run into folks, whether it was players or coaches. In fact, one of our neighbors was a family member of Dean Smith, and it turned out that was also my preschool teacher as well. So I literally learned how to play basketball from them, and they would actually, with their arms, make a basket, and that's how I learned how to play basketball. So very much a fabric of the Carolina community. I felt like that was a big part of my growing up, and all the memories and games that kind of go into that, both going to games over the years at the Smith Center. Tons of different things come to mind there. I guess the last thing I would say was I grew up in the mid 80s, early 90s. My first favorite player was Kenny Smith, and actually went to a Meet the Heels day when they used to do that at the Smith Center. So got to go for it and meet Kenny and some of the other players. So there's a few things that come to mind right away. And then in terms of podcasting, it was self-preservation in part, because I would mostly just after games, between games, in the off season, call family and friends and discuss stats at length, ad nauseum, over the phone. So this is a way for them to listen to me on demand rather than spending so much time hearing me talk about it. But my friend and co-host Craig, we became friends over Carolina basketball in Greensboro at a baseball game, and just one of those conversations that most of us have had, where you just start talking Carolina, and the next thing you know, that's been a core part of our friendship, whether it's watching Luke May beat Kentucky in the Elite Eight, going out to Chicago for the CBS Sports Classic a few years later, and any number of other games that we've experienced together. Gonzaga at the Smith Center comes to mind too. Yeah. So those are a few things that come up, both in terms of just becoming a fan and then a podcaster. I guess the last piece, I worked at the university for multiple years too, worked some with student athletes as well. So I've been in and around the university, both from growing up, but also from working there too.
Yeah, I tell you, man, listen, remarkable story. Like like everybody that comes on here, man, like that's like one of the main, always the first question that I ask them. And regardless of whether they Carolina fans or not, for all my guests that have came on here, like the first question that I always ask them is either how did you become a Tar Heel fan, or like how did you get into whatever it is they do specifically. I had an official on here, an actual official referee. I've had coaches on here, writers, scouters, like players, alumni. Like I've had so many different people, but listening to everybody's story, everybody has a different story that is like amazing. It's just so amazing to hear all of these different stories. Like, when you're looking from the outside in, you don't know all of these stories that really circulate throughout the university, and as far as fans and people that may be in the podcasting space, such as you and I, and just so many different stories, man, that are just incredible stories. From Coach Smith all the way down to people like me on the bottom. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's just remarkable, man. And your story is just incredible, bro. Like, I mean, just hearing how you guys started, how you became a fan, telling the family to go out of the room, and then you invite them in one by one, like they're a starting lineup. Like, that's That's amazing. That is those little things like that are amazing to me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm like you. I'm an 80s baby. So, you know, I'm not a young bug that's like in this new generation thing. Like, no, I grew up. I witnessed the '93 championship. I ain't witnessed nothing before that. But my first witness was the '93 championship, and I became a Tar Heel fan through my father and my family, like because they're none of them went to North Carolina. It was just they loved Carolina, so it was like, all right, all in line. Like you better not say the school down the street or whatever, and you know, just following in my father's footsteps. Like that's how I became a Tar Heel fan. So, but hats off to you, bro. That's an amazing story for sure, for sure, for sure. So let me ask you this: how do you and Craig like prep for shows and things like that? Like you know, being podcasters and things like that as well. Like, what all do you all delve into? Do you delve into all the sports? Or is it strictly just basketball, football, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, it's a good question. We primarily focus on men's basketball, but we will occasionally, as other stories are coming up, bring in other points. So we have a segment at the end of our show where we point out to a member of the Carolina community, whether that's a Carolina basketball player or coach or one of the other teams or just a member in the community that we want to shout out. So that's something that we typically do at the end, but we love college baseball too. And our family is originally from Omaha, Nebraska. So we would go out there in the summers all the time for the College World Series. We've been out there for a bunch of tournament runs and actually ran into Roy Williams the last time we were out there. Got a great picture with Roy. So college baseball is something we really enjoy talking about. We actually have a Twitter account, Bosch Brothers. So we run that as well and really get into the baseball side of things too. And I'm a Carolina diehard all the way through. So I'm a Carolina football fan as well. We don't talk as much football. Craig went to App State, so he's an App State football fan. But I try to work in as much Carolina football as possible on the show and get creative. I think last year we talked about who the Coach Prime when Dion was really just at the peak of everything college football all over ESPN and the Buffs were surging at the beginning of the season. We were trying to think, who would that Coach Prime be for Carolina if there was such a person? And then also comparing who was going to win more games, Carolina in the non-conference schedule for basketball or the football team. So we had some good conversations where I was finding ways to work in the football talk in the midst of football season as well.
Yeah, that's crazy. So like, do y'all take turns on what your what's the word that I want to use as far assignment is, or is it just okay, I'm gonna focus on these things and Craig, you focus on these things over here? Because I mean it's a two-man show with you guys. Like with me, of course, just being by myself. Of course, I have to do pretty much everything, I guess you could say, when it comes to stats and records and, history and things like that. And that can, at times, be overwhelming, for sure. So I can imagine, of course, the load being a whole lot lighter, but, maybe it could be heavy as well. So how do you all divvy up as far as like whose assignment or who's gonna focus on what, or do y'all just do it jointly? Like, is it a joint thing?
It's pretty joint. Yeah, we're a good team that way, and we have a joint planner, so we're able to co-construct the shows and schedule them out. And especially during the season, that happens pretty organically because a lot of the time we're spending time recapping the games from the week before, previewing the games of the week to come. In the off season last year, so we got started around Memorial Day last year and went the full off season. And it was really just during the week, kind of paying attention to both social media, but the news of things that would be coming out, whether that was news about schedules. I get really excited about the jersey number releases every year. So things like that we'd be talking about, and then just brainstorming ideas of things to talk about as well. Some of that would just be organic conversation, but typically co-constructing that. And then I'll just say for me, and Craig would attest to this too, I'm always just scouring information. I'm constantly wanting to stay up to date on what's going on, whether that's through Discords, through social media, through news. I like watching tape and old games. So I'd bring a lot of that to the table, especially when we do player previews for the season and those types of things. And we start to analyze what to expect from transfers, from new players, freshmen, those types of things, but also from the returners who are coming back.
Yeah. Seems like y'all teamwork makes the dream work, as they say, right? Like, seems like y'all got it laid out just how y'all want it. And I mean, that's a beautiful thing when two people are on the same page. They share the same vision. They have the same goals. It just makes things so much easier, and I mean, I listen, of course, like I said, y'all make it easier for each other, because it's two of y'all. So if one misses something, then the other may be there to kind of pick it up, basically, whereas, like, once again, I'm a one-man show, so I might miss some things. And I mean, so of course it all just falls right back on me, which is fine. I mean, it's not a problem, but because nobody's perfect. But at the same time, you want to try to be as accurate and factual as possible for the fans out there, because they're the ones that is looking for this intel that we have to provide to them. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's a good thing, man. Sometimes I wish I did have maybe a partner. I'm not gonna lie to you. Sometimes I wish I did have a partner, but don't get me wrong. I like the solo freedom, I guess you could say sometimes. So whatever. But
I was just going to add.
I'm not opposed to it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it like you're saying, it is nice to have somebody that when you do this enough, just like anything, when you have enough practice or reps at something, that we've developed a chemistry where we can kind of get a sense of reading where the other person is going. So I think a lot about just the team element of that. When you think about connectedness on a basketball court too, we try to think about that in terms of what we're doing. And Craig was a former news producer, so while sometimes I'll do more on the front end, although that is a joint effort too, he does a lot on the back end in terms of production, and so that is pretty amazing in terms of the editing and other things that he does. So that it makes a huge difference for us too. But the fun part is the back and forth, and my brother comes on a good amount as well, and we have that brother chemistry too that makes it fun. We have some other friends that kind of rotate in, and then we're looking at doing similar to what you're doing and having some more guests come on and just share people's stories, because that's really what it comes down to for us, is connectedness, community, a shared sense of experiences, and then folks' stories that also connect back to Carolina basketball.
Yeah. It's I tell you, man, I'm looking forward to the day when I come to point to the passer. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's good when you're playing your home games and at home doing your shows and things like that. But man, it also feels so good when you're on the I guess you could say on the road, and you're at other podcasts, and things like that. Because to me, I think being on the road is better than being at home. And to me, because of the fact, if you're getting started like I am, being at home is where you probably have to be for a little bit, because of the fact you're trying to build, you're trying to grow. Whereas, okay, now if you're on the road and you're on other podcasts, then that means that you're doing something. You're doing something to where people now want you to come and chop it up with them on their shows and things like that. Like, so I can't wait to go on the road, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've been home for a while, which is fine. It's all good. But I mean, yeah, it's gonna feel good, I guess. I've been on two. I've been on the road twice. I'll say that.
Okay.
It's crazy because I started this by listening to a Knicks podcast because I'm a Knicks fan. So, I was just one day in the chat basically, and I happened to send a message to the host that was hosting the show. He read my message, and I just asked him for his email. He gave me his email, and next thing you know, I done emailed him. He emails me back, and I'm like, listen, I do college basketball. Like I talk about college basketball, and he's not like a big fan of college basketball. It worked out perfect because he was like, well, I'm actually getting ready to start getting into college basketball because he runs the show with like two other guys. So he was like, oh, I might have to bring you onto the show. And I was like, hey, we can make that happen. At that time, man, I just had a laptop and I didn't have no mic, no setup, no nothing in here, man. So things just looked plain. And I was able to get on there, and from that moment on, it was history from there. It was history from there, man, which has now brought me here. And then I ended up a couple weeks ago, I was on the 5 Point Play podcast with some Duke guys. I was the only Carolina guy over there, man. So, but they real good guys. They real good guys. I can't say that they jumped me or anything, but they even though we rivals, they solid guys, man. They pretty cool people. So, but yeah, I can't wait, man. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's good. That's good that you're getting out on the road because that actually makes you less like Duke. If this is your kind of gearing up your non-conference schedule, that you're getting on the road where they like to stay in the confines of Cameron. So you're doing more the North Carolina way, where you're not afraid to go to Lawrence, right? You're not afraid to go to the Fog and get out there and
I'm not afraid at all.
On the road. Right.
Yeah, I'm not afraid at all. I'm not afraid at all. Like I'll go wherever. I will go wherever. Like I'll jump right in the fire with them, man. It could be 3, 4, 5 people on that podcast. I'll jump right in the fire and be right there by myself if I have to. But if they say, hey, bring some friends along. Oh, okay. You sure you want me to do that? Because I got quite a few people I can call and be like, hey, come on over. Like let's go in and team up against these guys, man. Because I mean, they want to go back and forth and things like that. So I mean, hey, I can always call you. I can call Isaac. I can call Riley Davis. I mean, I can call Adam Lucas, which Adam is more of Linzel, you kind of handle that. Like I believe in you. I trust you. Like you and you guys, y'all take care of that, man. Like, whatever. So, but it is what it is, man. It is what it is. But yeah, I can't wait to get on the road, man, and be able to come to and go to a lot of, other podcasters, space and be able to kind of sit down, chop it up with them, come to the JC court, you know what I'm saying? And everything, man, with you and Craig, like, whatever. So when y'all get that video for sure, I can't wait for that, man, because I know you guys are it's gonna be remarkable. It's gonna be incredible. I'm sure y'all gonna set it up right. It's gonna be good, man. That's gonna be good. I'm trying to get over to Spotify. Y'all got to get to the video, right? Like
YouTube is definitely where it is for sure. So yeah, we're excited about potentially. We'll see in terms of just that's the goal, but it's kind of the next step. So excited for that, and just excited that the season's getting closer. Right, I'm excited to dive into some different topics tonight. Because even just you reaching out got the juices going, man. I'm ready to talk Carolina basketball. So that's probably the best part about whether it's home or road is getting to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I get with you behind the scenes about an idea that I just came up with, as a matter of fact. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. So let me go ahead and just I tell you what. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, that is a good question. Well, you led off with the recruiting season, really, right? We have all these official visits for the class of 2025, especially that we're in the midst of multiple weeks. I think it's 5 straight weeks in a row of visits. So I'm curious about, do you have one player of that group that if you could get that one player, if Carolina could get that one player, is there one maybe other than AJ Dybantsa? Because that's probably going to be the answer for most folks. But who are those players that are standing out to you? Who are you most excited about who's visiting during this stretch?
Okay, so let's see. The first week, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we had, was it Nick Kaminia and
It was Dixon with Kamania, yeah.
yes, Derek Dixon. And then the following week we had Braylon last week.
Right.
Yes, Braylon was last week. This week we have AJ. Next week we have Isaiah Dennis.
I think that's right. Yeah, 27th. Right.
And yeah, and then the last week is Nico Bundalo and Caden Lewis. If I'm not, I think so.
That was impressive. You just rattled that all off by memory right there.
Yeah, man. I mean, when you study it, right? Like when you study it, that's what it is, man. Like, So I tell you, so of course, obvious, like you said, AJ. I don't think we're getting a Caden.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I do think we're getting Derek Dixon. I think we get. See, that's tough. If you would have asked me, like, if I had to pick 4 for us to get, because I do think we're gonna end up with like 4 recruits. I do think so. Out of the group that's coming, I think we're gonna land 4 of them. But you said just pick one.
Well, I'm curious about the 4 now too. So either way you want to frame it, because I think the question of, because that's been one of the areas of angst for Carolina fans, especially with the way that the offseason went with the portal, is it's already the middle of September. We don't have our first commitment yet. That's just unusual historically, and knowing that the landscape has changed so much that you have multiple other schools that are really in the same situation. So it is just a different situation. But in terms of realistically, who do you think we land? You said maybe 4 of those guys.
I think we land 4 of them. I really do believe that we get 4, and those 4, I think, like I said, I think we get Derek Dixon. Okay, possibly 5. Let me make sure I throw that out there. 4, but possibly 5. I think we get Derek Dixon. I think we get Isaiah Dennis. I think we get AJ Dybantsa.
Wow.
I think we get Nick Kaminia. And my 5th one would be Braylon Mullen.
Okay.
Those are my 5 that I think that we land. I mean, if you want to swap Braylon for Nico, I'm cool with that too. But I do think Dennis, Dixon, and Aminia, I think those are locks for sure. And I do think we get AJ. I think we get Dybantsa.
Sign me up for. I mean, just keep it going right now, Lenzel. You're getting me fired up because that would be unbelievable. We might have to actually run to Franklin Street if that happens. And I don't care if we're the only ones running because it's not a time that people normally celebrate, but we'll be out there. That's fine.
So I'll tell you why I think we get Dybantsa. So okay. I've heard a story from my guy Riley Davis. I heard a story where Riley was talking to who was that he was talking to? I think it might have been Greg Waddell from Sleepers Media. But anyways, Riley came out with the story that there is some history behind the scenes with AJ Dybantsa and Kenny the Jet Smith.
Right.
So Kenny the Jet knows AJ's family extremely well, like very, 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 very well. And from what I've heard, Kenny has been kind of like behind the scenes, I guess you could say, talking to the family and everything. I don't know how accurate or how true that is, but a lot of the times when my guy Riley says something or whatever, most of the time he's pretty dead on with things. Like, I don't think he would put things out there if that wasn't the case or whatever. So, but I just think that if AJ was gonna go somewhere, then he would have landed somewhere already. That's my thing, and I think with this weekend, with him being on campus this weekend, I think it's a wrap. I think it's a wrap. Now, will he commit this weekend? I don't know that. I don't think he will. But it wouldn't surprise me if we end up seeing something as far as AJ Dybantsa commits to North Carolina. And one thing for sure, right now Carolina needs the big fish before any other commits. Yes, it's cool to get Derek Dixon and go ahead and get him to commit, but is Derek Dixon a big fish, like a Jasper Johnson, or you know what I'm saying, or like a Caleb Wilson, or something like that? Like Derek Dixon, yes, he's a good player, and I would love to have him, but he's not a AJ Dybantsa type big fish. And I think if you land the big fish first, all the rest of them is just going to be like, yeah, I want to go and play with him too. Like, it's going to be a trickle down effect. And that's the reason why I think we do land 4. I think Isaiah Dennis lands because of the fact he's from North Carolina. Like, if I'm not mistaken, where is he from? Is it Davidson?
I think it's Davidson. Right. Yeah, I think he's near Charlotte.
Yeah. So I think we get him just because of that. Derek Dixon, I think, is a lot. Yeah.
I want to say that Dennis played for Jeff McGinnis. I think he had some ties with McGinnis. So he's got some Carolina connections as well.
Yeah. Look at Derek Dixon. Just canceled his visit to Arizona.
Right.
If that ain't a telltale sign, then I mean, come on. Because a lot of it, look at the other schools that he has on this list, and you telling me that North Carolina is not the pick? I mean, Vanderbilt, Virginia, Pitt, and who was the last one? Was it Syracuse? I know it was UNC.
I know the final 3. So he's got home visits. I think earlier this week, even he's doing his final home visits Tuesday night with Vanderbilt and Pitt, and then Hubert Davis gets the last word on Thursday. And I think that is really big. To me, this is speculation on my part, but to me, that's a sign that Carolina gets the night it's just Carolina and they get the last word. That seems like a good sign. At the same time, Pitt does talk about connection. So Derek Dixon's dad is very close with one of Pitt's assistants, and that can be hard to overcome sometimes as we've kind of seen with like even somebody like a Duthiero, who his dad played for Calipari, and he ends up with Calipari again. We'll see, but I'm with you. I think that Dixon, it's that one I feel pretty good about. But to quote Michael Scott from The Office, I'm ready to be hurt again. The way things have gone. So I'm waiting until it happens, but I think he actually will be the first to commit because he's committing on his birthday, which is the 27th of September. So that's happening really soon. And I don't think that, even though I think the visit will go really well this weekend with Dybantsa, I think he's going to extend it out. So I see, to your point about the big fish, I see Dybantsa and even Caleb Wilson as the Marlins in the recruitment cycle for Carolina. We're probably going to have the bigger fish on the line for a little bit longer before we're able to reel them in. But I'm also getting my hopes up with Dybantsa too, although I'm trying to keep the perspective of there's so much in the mix there, and I'm trying not to get my hopes too high, I guess. But at the same time, I'm what you said in terms of the Kenny connection. I heard some similar rumblings, and I'm very curious about this visit because it feels like they're going to do something different than they have typically. This guy's a generational talent, and I'm excited to see, is there something special that happens on this visit? I mean, AJ has, he just goes by the two initials. There's another guy who played at Carolina who has two initials. I have no inside information. That's more my wish of seeing a photo pop up with MJ and AJ. But likely not something like that. But I'm curious to see what they do for this weekend because, it's a huge deal, like you're saying. And to get AJ, you're right. Other players, whether it's Caleb Wilson even, likely are going to want to play with somebody like that.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, like, I like Caleb Wilson, but from the way things is looking, he might land in Kentucky. I mean, I know last weekend, I don't know if you had seen it, but the post that he put up about with the Caden Lewis, come on over, bro, or something like that. Like, he was actually on Kentucky's campus at that time when he put that up. I don't know if that's a telltale sign. As far as, I know that they was basically saying that it's between Carolina and Kentucky with him. But I don't think a Caden Lewis, number one, I don't think a Caden is coming to North Carolina for sure. Especially if Derek Dixon signs on his birthday or commits on his birthday. Because that's the same week. That's the same week that a Caden and Nico are on campus. That Dixon is supposed to commit to a school. Same week. So I think that's going to push a Caden out. I do think Nick Homenia is closer than what people think. I think Braylon Mullins is closer than what people think. I think he ended up having a great visit.
That's my feeling too.
And I think the visit was better than what people think it was. Now, again, as far as AJ is concerned, I'll throw this out there. For a long time, it was all about BYU. I mean, I'm sure you heard it that, BYU offered him $5 million. From what I heard, I don't deem that to be true. I think that's just like some clickbait in a way, I guess you could say, or whatever. I don't think BYU is really in the fold like that, like people think they are. And the reason why their name is sticking around is because of this whole $5 million thing. I think out of his last 7 schools, they're at the bottom.
Oh, wow.
Now, when you look at his 7 schools, it's who is it? It's BYU, Auburn, Kansas State, Alabama,
yep.
Carolina, and is it Baylor? I think
it is Baylor. I think you're right.
Baylor, yeah. So here's another thing that kind of points to North Carolina for me when it comes to AJ. During that whole BYU process, when we was hearing all of that, it never seemed like North Carolina was even in the picture at that time. Like when I was hearing BYU, I never knew that Carolina was really, really, really interested in AJ. I think we might have heard one little tidbit like a while ago. Like, oh, Carolina could be one of his 12, 15 schools or whatever the case may be. But that was when he had a plethora of schools on his list. When we was hearing about the BYU thing and the $5 million and all of that, then that's when he broke it down to 7. That's when we all, as Carolina fans, started looking, and I think it surprised a lot of us. It definitely surprised me
for sure.
So when I see Carolina in his 7, and here it is, we haven't been really like talking about AJ Dybantsa, because before then it was all about Jasper Johnson, Caleb Wilson, and the other players. It wasn't AJ Dybantsa. So then he comes, he gives us his 7. Carolina makes the list. Now, you done been to Kansas. You done been to Kansas State. You done been to, I think he went to Auburn.
Yeah, that was, I want to say that was his first visit last year.
Right. I think he's been to just about all of the schools. I think maybe, I don't think he's been to Carolina, and he hasn't been to Alabama yet. That's another sign to look at. Why all of a sudden now you done been to Kansas, who could have locked you in right there. We all know Bill Self and them. They pay to play. That's just what they do.
I never count him out, though, for that reason.
You never count him out. But at the same time, AJ would have committed to Kansas by now. He would have committed to Kansas. Like, Kansas don't waste time. That's one thing about Bill Self and them. They don't waste time when it comes to getting players. They just don't. It's Bill Self has always been that way. Kansas State, they're just trying to be one of these big dogs or whatever that's trying to kind of like flex and throw money around. But who really wants to go play at Kansas State? Now, granted, they got Coleman Hawkins, they got Onyenso, who I really wanted this year on the team, more than any other big man that we was going after. But they spent that money for them. So they're trying to kind of stay in the loop with like Kansas and all of that, because now they know that they got to compete in the Big 12. They got to compete with Kansas and Baylor and all of these other schools. Now here comes Carolina all of a sudden, like just out of nowhere. And I'm not going to lie to you. When I found out who his 7 was, the first thing I thought was, if he ends up making and starts these official visits, he's not going to, if Carolina is at the bottom of his official visits list, he's not going to get a chance to even get to Carolina, because Kansas or whoever or Alabama or somebody is going to go ahead and snatch him up. That hasn't happened. And now he's in Chapel Hill this weekend. Like, and then with the whole Kenny Smith behind the scenes talk that I've heard, yeah, I'm leaning towards AJ being a Tar Heel, man. Don't be surprised. Do not be surprised. Like it's like reading the room, watching the tea leaves, I guess you can say, as people say, man. Like, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. And like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if he does commit this weekend, which I don't think he's going to do over the weekend, but it won't surprise me. But you can rest assured, I guarantee you, Kenny Smith is probably on campus this weekend for sure. And probably a few other players. This is the time when you bring out the big dogs.
That's right.
And bring them to camp. You bring Jordan. You bring Kenny Smith. Like, you got the 05 guys. A lot of them are still in town from last week.
Right.
Like, championships. And I can't wait for them pictures, them Carolina pictures to drop with the shoes behind him. I can't wait for that to drop, man. I'm telling you, I truly believe AJ Dybantsa will be a Tar Heel. I truly believe that.
I'm going with it. I love the positivity. I love that certainty and kind of sense of reading behind the scenes, because that's really what we have to do with these recruitments. And there's so much smoke and misdirection and misinformation now more than ever, because you have agents and other people who are involved. And there's, like you're saying, with the different information that gets out around the negotiation amount, right? And how much somebody's being offered or asking for. A lot of times that information is getting out, it's getting out for a reason. And typically somebody has a motivation behind that. So this one's going to be interesting. I do think he's going to take it, I would guess, into the spring. I would not be surprised if it's more like February. If he commits this weekend, I really am going to run to Franklin Street. I'll drive from Virginia down to Franklin Street and meet anyone who wants to join me there to celebrate. That would be a huge recruiting win. I mean, you're talking about the number one player in the class, but also somebody that has been rated. I think it was Paul Biancardi at Peach Jam last year who had him as the overall number one in high school at that point, above Cooper Flagg.
Yep.
And so you're talking about somebody who's potentially a generational talent. It would be the first number one prospect in a class since Harrison Barnes back in 2010. That would be huge for recruiting, which is already going well in spite of this last summer. But I think Hubert is going to continue to flex his muscles once we get done with this class. So we'll see. I think it's going to go a little bit longer, but I love the positive energy, because that would be such a huge get. I do think that BYU actually is potentially a player, and even Kansas State, just because this is the new landscape that we're in, and we're seeing, like you said, those schools are throwing around money. And so until we really know what the motivation top priorities are for AJ and his family, I think you have to keep that in mind too. BYU is coming in terms of that with their new coach from the Phoenix Suns and the amount of money that they're able to bring. But I keep, the more this goes, I keep getting my hopes up that he's going to come. So I'm going to kind of stick with what you're saying and hope that happens. And then you pair him with Mullins is the one that you mentioned, that Kaminia too, but Mullins, the visit seemed to really, it feels like things may have shifted. And again, that's just sort of my gut more than anything else, but it wouldn't be the first time that a star from a high school in Indiana came to UNC, right? You have the lineage of Montross and Sean May and Tyler Zeller. And he would just add to that list of folks from Indiana that's such a basketball frenzy state to come down to Chapel Hill. So he's one that I really want, I think. And I do think if things are moving with him, I don't know about Dennis. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Isaiah Dennis would, as much as he is from North Carolina, he has the North Carolina connections.
Yeah. If
you end up with Dixon and Mullins, that's a crowded backcourt, especially when we don't know who's staying from this year's team. So that'll be really interesting to monitor. It honestly could go so many different ways. And I think that's what's so interesting and exciting about this next few weeks in the recruiting process. And for some of those guys, Caleb Wilson probably included, because I don't buy into the whole Kentucky comments. I think he does seem like somebody who's just enjoying the process of being recruited. And whoever he's with, he's taking pictures with and saying, this is the place, come by, let's team up. I think his process is going to continue into the spring as well. But again, I could be wrong. It really could go any number of ways. Yeah. Also true of the season this year. I think there's so many different possibilities, which makes this current team also really exciting and interesting to follow as well.
Yeah. And I was going to say that about Mullins and Dennis. One of the two. Yeah. Either if we get Mullins, then Dennis might not come. If we get Dennis, then Mullins is not coming. So, but I'll definitely still take Nico. I'll take Nico Bundalo.
Right.
For sure. Like, I mean,
he's a different player.
6'11". Yeah. 6'11". I mean, absolutely. Put him at the 4. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Let's bring him. And to your AJ Dybantsa point, if it was all about money for Dybantsa, he would have been already committed somewhere.
I don't know, because I think if it was, and just circling back to the Jasper Johnson recruitment, and I don't know, exactly what happened, but I think sometimes these can extend out where you start to see the bidding phase of the process. But I think with AJ, just at least if you're going off of what his dad said, which was after Pete Sham, his dad was going to cut down the list to this final list. And then AJ, that was the first time that he actually talked to coaches at that point. So he wasn't involved in the process until the end of the summer. And then they were going to go through the visits. So it does seem like, at least to me, I think he's probably going to go through each visit and then decide. And what's interesting about the timing of this is that the season hasn't started, right? And so I kind of expect, historically anyway, we've had big-time recruits come to games during the year in their senior year before they've committed. I wouldn't be surprised if we even see that. But again, having said that, I could be completely off on that. I think these recruitments can go in so many different directions, which is fun to it's fun to talk about the possibilities. And but anyway, I'm going with what you're saying, which is he's committing this weekend. I will meet you at Franklin Street, and we're going to party and celebrate like it's 2017, like it's 2009, like it's 2005 this weekend.
Yeah, just let me correct that, because I did say it's possible he could commit this weekend, but he might not. So I mean, but it's a strong possibility. Like I said, I mean, there's a lot of different things that really work out in Carolina's favor when it comes to him, because like I said, if it was about the money, especially like a BYU situation, $5 million, nobody's getting paid $5 million, and ain't no other team going to give you that. I don't care what team it is. Nobody is giving you $5 million. And so if BYU wants to give you $5 million, then you go to BYU. There's always the transfer portal if you decide to want to stick around for another year, which we're going to get into that here briefly. But if you go to BYU, get the $5 million. I mean, that for sure. So that's the reason why I say I don't think it's about money. But things are right now, the way that things are going, it's Carolina's favor. And I truly believe that. And I think it's Carolina's favor. I see him either going to Carolina or Auburn. One of those two. Possibly Baylor.
I could definitely
those are my three. Yeah.
I think Auburn makes a lot of sense. I don't think he ends up at Kansas, but Kansas will always scare me. It would be really interesting. Like, obviously, I don't want that to happen, but it would be interesting from the standpoint of he's a Nike guy, right? He's been with Nike through EYBL, and that is another interesting wrinkle to this current landscape is Kansas being the biggest Adidas school in college basketball. And so how does that work out? But we actually have an example of Ian Jackson has an Adidas deal, and he was on the Adidas circuit, and now he's at one of the biggest Nike schools. So it's just kind of the new sort of landscape with the shoe companies and then the schools that these guys are going to, which I think is different than what it was before. You could almost bank on an AJ Dybantsa if he's on the Nike circuit. He wasn't previously before the NIL era. He was probably going to a Nike school, and Ian Jackson the same way with Adidas.
Yeah. And you made a good point right there, man, because the reason why I don't see him going to Kansas is because I think AJ wants to go somewhere where he's the star. Like he's ranked the number one player in the country, so therefore he wants to be the number one player on the team wherever he goes. And I don't think I think if he goes to Kansas now, he's got to fight with Darren Peterson,
Right.
who's probably going to end up at Kansas.
I would
Not
expect
a
that.
definite yet, but he's probably going to end up at Kansas. Of course, if he goes to BYU, he's certainly going to be the best player on that team. You don't know how he's going to be or who's going to leave Baylor. You don't know who's leaving Auburn. Kansas State, I just don't see that at all anyway. I don't even know why Kansas State is even in the mix.
I think I will say I really like Jerome Tang as a coach, and he's done an amazing job there, taking them to the Elite Eight a couple years ago, and the combination of Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson was so fun to watch. So I think they've got a loaded front court this year, which honestly I'm kind of glad it's not me. I'm not a coach, but I'm glad I'm not coaching it and figuring out the minutes, because they have so many guys in that front court that you're going to have to figure out a way to keep everybody happy with all the transfers they had come in. But yeah, I don't rule them out. I think it's going to be really interesting, but I'm with you. I think Auburn is definitely a threat. Anytime Alabama is in the picture these days, man, it's just been one of those things with Alabama where whether it's on the court or recruiting, we need to win one, right? Like we need some positive feelings. So whether it's a recruitment like that, and then let's definitely take care of them in December. We definitely need to move this in the other direction with Alabama and Nate Oates specifically, because he has a thing with, it's not just with Carolina, but it's with blue bloods in general. And whether he's not, he's maybe Alabama's going to be a new blood eventually, right? You could put him in that category, but he has sort of this chip on his shoulder when it comes to the Carolinas, the Dukes, and Kentuckys of the world. And he brings that when he plays us. So we just got to be ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and just so you know, one last thing, just so you know, it's always one of them things where they want to, because it's what keeps the rivalry between Carolina and Duke. Okay, this year, Duke's got the number one player in the country. So who gets the number one player next year? It's something to think about. It just keeps the rivalry, even though they're not going to play each other. But it's the talk that like all of this talk that's going on with Cooper Flagg this year. All of that, and Duke, all of that same talk will be for AJ Dybantsa next year. And the boys up the road, the boys in Argyle, or whatever. I just think about little things like that, man. Like I'm telling you, like it's because that keeps the rivalry going, right? Because anytime they play each other, they're gonna be like, oh, Duke had Cooper Flagg last year, and the way that Duke did this against Carolina last year, and all of that. And I'm speaking as if I'm in the year with AJ Dybantsa on the team. That it's like, oh, but Carolina's got the number one player this year, AJ Dybantsa, and he's doing. I just think about certain things because sometimes things happen that way.
What would be super sweet, Lenzo, would be, so this last year, Duke played at Carolina, and then I think they turned around on Monday and had to go to Coral Gables and play Miami.
Yeah.
What would be super sweet is AJ goes to Carolina, Duke has to play AJ that weekend, and then turn around on Monday and go to Miami and face the Boozers. Like that is my dream, is not only do we get AJ, but they don't get the Boozer twins. And I've got high hopes for this recruiting cycle, clearly. So that's what I want to see.
Where do you think they go? You think they go to Miami?
That's the way it feels right now. But I will say what I've said all along is until they commit, I still believe. I just can't believe that they're not going to go to Duke. And I get that they're in the Miami area, right? That's where they're going to school. And Carlos has said that they're open in their recruitment, even to the point that they were considering, or at least were listing Carolina. But until I see those hats come on and they say Miami, that's when I'll say, okay, we're safe. But I do think that's going to be the choice. I think that's going to be the choice, and I think you probably see then that Nate Ament end up at Duke, maybe Koa Pete, but he's got some other options that are out there too. So I think it would be most likely Nate Ament and the Boozers end up at Miami.
I think Koa Pete stays out west.
Yeah. Arizona?
Yeah, I think he stays out that way. I like Nate Ament at
He's
UNC.
really good.
Yeah, I like him at UNC. He's another one though. He's another one that was not in talks when everybody was talking about Nate Ament. Like Carolina was nowhere in the picture. I mean, they was in his like top 30 schools. They wasn't in the picture like they are now. Now we're starting to see stories like, oh, Nate Ament is, taking home visits from UNC and all of that. And I'm like, okay, some things is going on here. I don't think the Boozer twins go to Miami.
Really?
I'll say this. The reason why. I don't think they go to Duke either, though. I think they go to like Florida State, Florida. I think they stay in the state of Florida.
Okay.
The only way that they go to Miami is it depends on what kind of season Miami is going to have this year. Because if Miami is not good this year, I think this might be Jim Laranaga's last year. I think he's going to retire.
That's fair. Yeah, that would be the question is if Larinaga retires, then everything changes. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is, I'm speaking for me, like I get so fixated on the current state of the recruiting battles and who commits. But we've seen that with the portal especially, when players find landing spots, there's going to be decommitments, right? Some of these guys who committed potentially are going to go somewhere else. And that's the same thing with coaches leaving too. So you may not have things, typically you're not going to have things settled until into the offseason.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think that is something to watch. But if Larinaga is there, and I actually think he will, and I think they're going to bounce back. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were, 2 years ago, because Jordan Miller and Isaiah Wong both of them were underrated in terms of the things that they brought to that team.
Yeah.
Miller especially. Like Wong was the player of the year in the ACC for a reason, but Miller was a connective player, but also could be a star. And the combination of those guys with Pack and Omir was dynamic. I do think they bounce back, but keep an eye on that. I think you're right. I think it's a really good point, because if he's not there, for me, that would change things, because you don't know who the coach is going to be, right?
Now, the only way that I can see him, because, Caden doesn't want to go to Duke, but he wants to play with his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a lot of people talk about that like that. Like, they try to keep that as swept under the rug for whatever reason. I don't understand why. But Caden doesn't want to play at Duke. It's Cameron that doesn't mind going to Duke, but they want to be a package deal. So that's the reason why they're talking about that. And I do think that if they do go to Miami, it wouldn't surprise me. But that just means Larinaga is going to stay a little while longer until they leave. Let's put it like that. But if he ends up retiring before then you can probably consider them. I mean, the chances and all of that is leaning towards Duke, but Florida State is right there in the mix. But I think Miami, they want to stay in that area, because I think that's the area where they live. I don't think they want to just go right up the road to Tallahassee or where's Florida at? Florida's in
Gainesville.
Gainesville. So I think they want to stay in the Miami area, like beaches, South Beach, or Durham. I mean, what are we doing here?
I love Durham and have lived there previously, for several years. But listen, especially at 17, 18, that's hard to beat.
Yeah,
and they grew up there too.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll ask you this or whatever, and just real quick, what do you think about like the transfer portal and NIL?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, well, I have a lot of thoughts about it. So number one, the way that this happened shouldn't have happened this way, and that's unfortunate because player choice is really important, especially with coaches have the free choice to go to the school of their choice, as they should. And I think it was important for players to have that choice too. In terms of the fan experience, and me coming from growing up, really like you were saying about that 93 team, those are some of my foundational memories of Carolina basketball too, and into the 90s. And it's just a different era. So it is a sense of loss around the college basketball glory days for me of the 90s, and thinking about those teams that developed, even with, you think about Carter and Jamison and Coda and those guys being together for multiple years the way they were. Yep. We just don't see that as much. So that part is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I think there are some benefits for the players in terms of having that choice, because in some cases it works out really well. And Harrison Ingram is a great example of that, right? I mean, that was obviously, he looked at Carolina initially, goes to Stanford first, but without the portal, he'd have to be, and the rules changing, he'd have to sit out a year. And I don't think he probably comes in and does that. So I think that piece of it is really positive. But I was watching your conversation with Pete Chilcutt, and I completely agree with the piece around it's so easy to leave now that sometimes that's not in the player's best interest when things are tough, right? When you hit adversity, and I know Pete talked about that. I remember Joe Barry talking about this, I think on his senior night, that he was ready to pack it up after a tough Roy Williams practice and in that first year. And so I think you're seeing more of that, where the way it was before without the portal, some of those folks then become just, you can't separate them from the university where they went, because they develop as they go. So that part of it is definitely a drawback, but ultimately I'm in favor of the players having the choice to decide and to be able to move around. And then, I mean, really the piece of that connected to it is the NIL piece that comes in almost at the same time, right? And so that's the piece that the NCAA, that was their greatest mistake, was they could have got ahead of this rather than being dragged through a legal process. And unfortunately, it's either a lawsuit or Congress that's having to take the lead on a lot of these changes. Bubba Cunningham was actually talking about that today on Joe Ovius and Joe Giglio's podcast, and the fact that they're trying to move as the next step to paying players and what that looks like. And unfortunately, that's what it takes. And as a result, as you've talked about a lot, there was no regulation, and that's really what caused the problems more than anything else. So I'm in favor of players getting paid. I think they should. It was definitely an inequitable situation before, where the players are generating all this revenue for the university, but they're not seeing the revenue back in a proportional way. And now they are, and that's definitely a positive. But there have to be caps, there have to be contracts, in part to protect the players too, because there have been stories about schools not paying the players, right? Not honoring the contracts, and folks actually not leaving a school or waiting to transfer until they got paid. And that's just a horror story, to be honest. But so I feel a lot of ways about it. As a fan, there's a sadness that we won't have that experience typically of being able to see guys develop for 2, 3, 4 years at the same school. But it brings in people like Brady Manick, and that was a heck of a ride with Brady that season in the tournament. It brings in Cormac Ryan, it brings in Harrison Ingram, and this year Kate Tyson and Ben Allen and Tyjon Claude. So that part is exciting because we get to really connect with folks that, I mean, when you think about it, it's hard to believe that Harrison and Cormac were only at UNC for 1 year. Right, it felt like they were Tar Heels for forever, and now they are, and so that part is really, really cool and really exciting. So, like a lot of things, there are definitely drawbacks and positive trade-offs in the other direction. So I see a lot of that in the landscape currently.
Yeah. So I had that conversation with Pete. Then I ended up talking to David Noel, and I also spoke with who is it? Nick Delahanty from Keeping It Heel. And so both of them had some really good points. David he said that it should only be a one transfer thing in the portal to where you can only transfer one time. Nick said that it should be 2, but you kind of regulate that second one. So basically, you come in, you transfer 1, okay, that's fine. It is what it is. Now, if you decide to transfer a second time, you have to stay in college for at least 2 years, regardless of what year you are. You have to stay. And I mean, of course, within the 4 years, I guess you could say. So if you're a freshman, you come in, you want to transfer from your sophomore season or into your sophomore season, you want to transfer, then, well, I don't know. I guess it would have to be like after your sophomore season if you wanted to transfer again. Okay, now you got to stay in college for those 2 years. You can't go to the league, whatever the case may be. Which I get it, but you got to figure out a way to really balance that, I guess you could say. Or, if you transfer one time, you got to at least stay 2 seasons or something like that. Give it the one transfer, but if you transfer after your freshman season, whatever team you transfer to in your sophomore season, well, guess what? You got to play there for your sophomore season and your junior season. And then you can end up leaving if you want to, or whatever the case may be, going pro, whatever. I think that might be the way to do it instead of having 2 being able to transfer twice or whatever. Like, because I'm with you. I grew up in the era where if you transferred, you had to wait a year. You had to sit out a year. So now it's taking that it's putting things, it's kind of regulating it a little bit to where, okay, we'll give you that one freebie. It's like fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you type thing. So, all right, I'm gonna give you that first freebie. That one's on me. But if you do it again, then you got to sit for 2 years. You got to stay at that team for 2 years, period.
I like that in theory. I go back to the NCAA, and I'll try not to just make this an NCAA rant podcast. I need like a full hour for that, but that was the way that was set up before. And the problem is, as there should be exceptions to whether it's mental health or other health reasons, family members being able to then transfer home. Tez Walker was a really good example of that last year with Carolina football. And so in theory, it was a really good idea, but the problem is that the NCAA didn't regulate that correctly. And as a result, they end up putting a stay on transfers. And so we are where we are. I agree, though. I mean, I think like having some kind of limit would help, because the problem then becomes, as you're pointing out, when you have folks who've been at 4 different schools or something like that. But I look at Van Allen Lubin as somebody who this is his 3rd school in 3 years. And, in both years, his coach leaves, right? His coach resigns, retires, or in the case of Stackhouse, gets fired. And so a player like that should have the choice. So that's where I just don't trust the NCAA to handle it correctly. And I think the best path forward is the current path, just because there ultimately needs to be a different regulation body. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. So,
well, of course, if your coach leaves or gets fired or something like that, then of course you got to give those players that option. I mean, that's only right. The way that they're doing it now, you got to give them that option. But what I'm saying is, a player that just wants to leave because they couldn't deal with adversity, they couldn't get out there and really grind to try to get playing time and things like that, or they're just not happy with the team that they went to. Like, no. We're not gonna do it like that. It just kind of flows in with the NIL situation. I want the players to get paid, but I think there should be some sort of salary cap. I don't know how you're going to do that. Because of the fact the Dukes, the Carolinas, Kansas, Kentucky's, Alabamas, and all of that got way more money than your Fresno States and Akron's and some of these other schools out here. Like, the Grand Canyons and Campbell's and Elon's, like they got way more money than that. So I don't know how that salary cap is going to work, because it's going to be different for each team, of course, but that's got to be regulated. And like David said, which made so much sense. Right now, the players are the ones that has the control, and the schools and the coaches need to be the ones that's got the control, not the players. Because if you if you continue to give the players this power, I guess you could say, they're going to end up ruining the sport. Period. And I love college basketball, but don't ruin it. I just don't. It's got to be regulated, and the coaches and the universities have to have the power. I don't care how anybody wants to look at that. Not the player. Because a lot of these guys is going to these schools when 9 times out of 10, they don't want to go there. They really don't want to go there. But the only reason they're going there is because of the money. Let's just call it what it is. Like, AJ Dybantsa.
You don't think that Coleman Hawkins' dream school was Kansas State?
You know what? I think he had posters on his wall.
Yeah.
I think he just loved Jerome Tang because it's like Wu-Tang. I think he was a big Wu-Tang fan.
Just like AJ Dybantsa's dad, right?
Yeah, I think he loves purple. And I think he just always wanted to go there. And it was just like, hey, I want to leave the state of Illinois and go to the state of Kansas, where I really, really, really been wanting to get to, where I really wanted to go. Yeah, I think Kansas State was his number one go-to school. I don't even know why he sat up and entertained everybody else. But
he's a good example of exactly what you're talking about, though. In terms, and granted, like, he stayed at Illinois, he graduated from Illinois, so it is different for him. This is the first transfer. But where I differ a little bit, and I don't want to rehash it too much, but I like your point about the power piece of it. And for me, the adults in the room being the universities and the NCAA, the collection of the universities, they weren't the adults in the room. They didn't regulate this the way they should have. And so now I'm very much for – I appreciate somebody like Bubba Cunningham, who's very much an advocate for the players. Mm-hmm. There probably does need to be some middle ground, but that's kind of where I land on it. But it's one of those. It's just such a complex issue, and it opened up this can of worms that we didn't need to have this conversation. Like, we could have avoided, right? Like these conversations if there was a proactive approach to this and saying, look, we need to do this. We need to take some action. It's going to happen one way or another. So let's build out a system that works well, that we can test out, and regulate this in a way that it's beneficial for the game, it's beneficial for the universities, for the coaches, and for the players themselves too.
Yeah. It's something's got to be done.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, some just has to be done. That's the bottom line to everything.
Right.
Something has to be done. The NCAA is so far behind; they don't know what they're doing. And I'll say that I ain't got no problem saying it. The NCAA is far behind. They don't know what they're doing, and by the time that it's time for them to fix these situations, it's going to be too late. Just like they've been for however long. Like they're
really
too
good
far
tournaments.
behind. Yeah,
they know how to throw a tournament.
Now you're trying to extend the tournament.
Right.
Like you're trying to make it so much bigger than what it already is. Like leave it alone. Like what are y'all doing? I don't get it. But then man, I could go on and on about the NCAA, man.
It's a whole other topic for like 3 hours.
A whole nother topic, man. I'm telling you, like it's just crazy. It's just crazy. So, but we'll see. So, listen, I might have to have you back on next week. What you doing next week? Because there's so many other things that we got to delve into, but I don't want to long draw this show out. Like, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, absolutely.
We got to set something up for another show for next week, man. But we'll talk so that we can figure something out for sure. Because there's so many other things that I want to talk to you about for sure and get your thoughts and opinions on it and see what you think about things. Like, yeah,
that sounds
figure
sounds
something
great.
out.
I'm excited to talk more about the current team, and I know one of the questions that the discussions that you've had quite a bit is the X factor. I will say that the X factor I had in mind for tonight probably will change by next week because there's so many options, but I am fascinated to have that conversation because it really does feel like with this team that there are several players that the distance between their floor and their ceiling within this one season, there's a huge distance between the floor and the ceiling. And so you could choose a lot of different options. And that's what makes this particular season, I think, fascinating on top of the fact that we have some really high-level talent, both veteran talent and then the guys who came in. So let's talk.
I will ask you this, and you ain't gotta. We ain't gonna get into it.
Okay.
but just because you probably already know who my X factor is. I'm sure you done probably heard a few episodes. I'm sure, but you ain't gotta say nothing. Yeah, but I figured you probably already know who my X factor is. But I'm curious to know who your X factor is.
So I wasn't going to go Withers partially for that reason, but I went back and forth, but I landed on Jalen Washington, and I can tell you more why later on. Because I just feel like there's got to be somebody who steps up in the front court.
Yeah,
and he is a tantalizing prospect in terms of just like what he brings to the table, what we've seen from him in terms of what he's flashed, of course, offensively. I have a lot of questions too. And so, happy to go deeper into that. Yeah. But I went back and forth. I mean, there was Venal Lubin, I think, could be on that list because for similar reasons.
Yeah.
And then in terms of that guy who I think takes us to the next level, it's probably Drake Powell. And granted, like I'm trying to temper my expectations for the freshman and especially for him, but I got to see him live. I think Riley went to some of the summer scrimmages, the summer camp scrimmages too, and seeing him in person, it's easy to see what he could bring on both ends of the floor. And you can't argue with the athleticism, with the instincts defensively, and then he's further along offensively than I think a lot of people realize. So we got half into it because I got excited, I got rolling. So, but we can say
it's all good because we gonna recap it. We're gonna recap this for sure because we got to do a part 2. We definitely got to do a part 2 for this, man, because I want to know about everybody that you just mentioned and why you say them. Because I'm intrigued. I'm gonna be honest with you. Everybody that I've asked, you're the first one to say Jay Watt. So I'm intrigued because I really want to know. Now, granted, I have my thoughts about Jay Wash as well. Good thought.
Mm-hmm.
Some things some weaknesses, but a lot of strengths. And I'm curious to know why you picked him for the X Factor, because that's the X Factor. Ooh, okay, all right.
And I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I hope that it. I mean, if it does, I think it takes us to another level.
Yeah. Well, you being optimistic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I am with AJ Dybantsa, right?
Listen, the next time we talk, we're going to be hearing that AJ has committed, and that Jay Wash is getting some preseason ACC first team votes just based on what people are seeing in practice and the exhibitions. They're coming up. So let's just keep the positivity rolling. I like to say in the off season that let's just let our expectations run wild.
Yeah,
why not? Let's just have fun with it.
It's positivity for sure, but I can definitely tell that you definitely running with that. AJ's gonna commit this weekend. Like I can, you really running with that, boy. I tell you, maybe I don't know if I should have said that. Oh man, wow.
I know what you meant though. That it's coming soon. So regardless of when it is, I will text you, and I will be in the car on the road. Down I-85 to Chapel
on the way to Franklin Street, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I might have to go over there with you. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like I said, I think it's gonna happen. So we'll see or whatever. So listen, Jonathan, tell everybody, man, where they can find you at.
Yeah, appreciate it, Linzel. So we're on Twitter at Point Passer Pod. And then we are on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on pretty much anywhere you get your audio podcasts. We are going to be looking to potentially do some video this year, so stay tuned for that. And potentially even looking at some live postcasts, maybe too, experimenting with some things. But for now, you can find us on Spotify, on Apple, and we have some recaps on some of the similar topics we talked about tonight in terms of thoughts about the offseason, but we're going to be moving into player previews and talking about the exhibitions and things there's a lot of news coming, and the season is approaching fast. So excited to have those conversations over there. And yeah, appreciate the opportunity to be on tonight. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. So and for everybody, all of his information is going to be in the description below. So make sure you get over there, check him and Craig out, man, on it's really Point to the Passer.
That's right.
But that's a lot of wording to type in the search bar. I guess Twitter and everybody is said kind of shorten it up a little bit, like whatever. But
yeah, we go by PTTP for short on Twitter a lot, but it's Point to the Passer exactly is the name of the podcast on anywhere. We're on Pocket Casts, anywhere you get your audio podcasts, we'll show up.
Yeah. And like I said, all of the links will be in the description for everything. So make sure y'all jump over there and like I said, check him and Craig out, man. Really good guys. I support you guys over here at 94 Feet, man. Love what you guys are doing. Can't wait for the video to come. Listen, I'm hoping I get to be the first guest. I'm hoping, but if not, I understand. But
I will go ahead and say right now, listen, I know I've said it like 5 times. I'm going to say it a 6th because I'm so excited about it. If AJ commits, you'll be our first video guest.
Oh man. The pressure. Now I got to call AJ. I got to call AJ and Kenny. Kenny, go ahead and make that happen.
Yeah,
I got to get to
whatever we need to do.
Yeah, I got to get to JC's court, man. Like, come on, man. Like, let's make this happen. So, yeah, man. Listen, I appreciate you. I really do appreciate you coming on, man. Like, It's been an honor. Salute to you, my guy. Like I said, keep doing what y'all doing. You guys got my support for sure. Anything you guys need, of course, you can always hit me up. You got the number. We talk off air, things like that, whatever the case may be, man. Like I said, I'm here for you guys to and take that ride along with you guys, man, throughout your journey for sure. So big shout out to you guys, man, and keep going for sure.
Appreciate you. Excited to see the Zell Dome continue to grow.
Absolutely, man. There's some big things coming. Some big guests coming. I ain't gonna reveal anything. Can't reveal it just yet. But got some big guests coming or whatever. I tell you away from the off scene. I tell you all.
Sounds good.
I tell you off.
I'm ready.
As far as what's going on. So but yeah, man. Like once again, man, appreciate you coming by. We're gonna figure something out so that we can do a part 2 next week or something, because we gotta get that in for sure. Like I didn't know how much the time was going like that, but that's what happens when you're talking, man. Like
that's right.
We just did it off the dome, man, which was a good thing. Like first time that I've ever done that, and turned out successful. We didn't have to do the freeze mode. We didn't have to do any of that, man. So that means it was a good show for sure. So yeah, man. But we gonna chop it up, and we're gonna chop it up. We got some more things to talk about. So, but appreciate it. Make sure you get over there, check out the Point to the Passer podcast with my guy Jonathan and Craig. And until the next time,